Welcome into the Solo Shot Sports Podcast. I'm your host, Dom Manna. Happy Solo Shot Saturday, everyone. It's Triple Two's February 22nd, 2025. For those of you that are into that kind of thing, triple numbers, lucky. But what a difference a week can make. A difference in vibes, a difference in storylines, a difference in attitudes. And part of it is, these teams are just getting to camp, so the offseason itself is kind of wrapped up. But another aspect of it is the fact that, we're kind of in this weird period. The NBA hasn't been playing. Football's been, completed, and we're in between that time where, we're getting over that blowout of a Super Bowl, and the combine and rookie hype hasn't happened yet. The NHL, dominated the sports world for the first time in quite a while with their, 4 tournament. But in general, I think the biggest storyline the last couple weeks was, wow, the Red Sox signed Alex Bregman. It's the move that Red Sox fans were begging for. This is the leader we need in the clubhouse. This is the right-handed bat we need in the lineup. And instead of being able to sit in that positivity, sit in those vibes, as Boston tends to do, it tends to, love that dirty water. It's toxic water out here in Boston. Everyone's always looking for, something negative to talk about. Everything's looking for, an inch to push the narrative in a negative way. And, usually they get an inch and they take a mile. This time they were given, full on bullets by 2 of the Red Sox biggest hitters in the lineup. First, obviously, being Rafael Devers, who, with the move of Alex Bregman joining the team, I said it on last week's show, and I believe this, that the Red Sox best lineup going forward is that Rafael Devers, takes the transition to DH, which, we didn't think it was going to necessarily happen this year, but we knew it was in his future. He was not going to play all 17 years of his career at the hot corner. He's got a negative 62 defensive runs saved in his career. As a defender, he is statistically the worst fielding third baseman in the American League since debuting, and he's right up there at the top of baseball with the amount of opportunities he's gotten. He's a fantastic hitter. He's on a Hall of Fame track as a hitter, and a great player, the face of the team. He's already gotten paid. He's gotten his $300 million extension. So the move from third base to DH does not devalue him for contract talks moving forward. It's just the move that helps the team. When you can bring in a guy in Alex Bregman, who has a career positive 28 defensive runs saved. For those of you doing math at home, that's a 90-run difference in their career at the same position, pretty much. I know Bregman played a little bit of shortstop and, second base his rookie season. But the obvious move there is you can get significantly better, even on a year-to-year basis. It's about a 15-run difference at the hot corner, when your infield defense was one of the things that you were, clamoring at the beginning of the offseason that you needed to improve. If you did not sign Bregman, you were certainly going to go out and trade for 10-time Gold Glove winner Nolan Arenado. And the defense at the hot corner is important, especially, Trevor Story, when he's on the field, is a very good defensive shortstop. You'd have that left side of the infield much better than it was last season. And you have a budding star in Christian Campbell, who they look to be giving every opportunity to make the opening day roster. He's a true second baseman. He's athletic enough to play shortstop, play in the corner outfield, but he's a second baseman. And he's also a right-handed bat. So you're able to add 2 right-handed bats and improve the defense if Rafael Devers moves to DH. And obviously, whether the Red Sox just didn't have the conversation at an appropriate time. I think going into the offseason, it was pretty clear that they were interested in Alex Bregman. They were tied to Nolan Arenado. So Rafael Devers had to know that, this could happen. If they get one of those 2 guys, he's likely going to be moved off the position. And he goes out in his first press conference and says, no, I'm not moving off third. I play third. that's my position. That's what I was promised when I signed this extension here. Like, I am the third baseman of the Boston Red Sox. And he looked very, very annoyed. You can see in the press conference as well that the interpreter did a fantastic job of, hiding what Rafael Devers was really saying, softening the edges. When he was asked point blank, isn't that the Red Sox decision? You could clearly hear that he said, no, it's my decision. But the interpreter did not say that. And it caught national headlines. The Red Sox were being talked about on ESPN, on national sports talk radio for the first time in a while. And while that's exciting, it's not for the right reason necessarily. And, people were saying, oh, it's February. We haven't even played spring training games yet. The shock is there when Rafael Devers apparently had a meeting with Craig Breslow and Alex Cora to discuss, what the addition of Bregman meant. He left camp for a few days to see family. I think he was a little pissed off, a little hurt. But it's for the best of the team. And you want to hear your star players saying the right things. It's good for an impression on the young guys. It's good for public facing, and it doesn't cause, nothing burger stories like this has become. But the Boston media, smelled blood in the water. That was the lowest of hanging fruit. Everybody else got asked about it. Alex Cora got asked about it, talked about, hey, well I just want to put the best 9 in the field. How, the man who made that promise is in St. Louis. Chaim Bloom, who extended Rafael Devers, is no longer the one calling the shots in Boston. They have new leadership now, which, includes Bregman on the field as a leader. And Bregman, he's athletic enough to play second base, but that's not his primary position. And that also blocks Christian Campbell's chances of being in the opening day lineup. A guy who's one of the top 5 prospects in baseball, has just crushed at every single level. And I would hate to see his growth get stunted and him not have a Jackson Holiday situation where he plays well this spring training, but doesn't make the opening day roster for, keeping veterans around. And you want to see a little bit more. And then by the time he tries to get back up to speed, because he's been seeing, minor league and quadruple A arms in spring training and at Worcester, he comes up to the major leagues and he starts really slow. You don't want to see that kind of thing. You want him to get acclimated. You want him to roll with the punches a little bit. And the Red Sox have been doing a great job of that over the years of giving these guys those opportunities at a young age. Very, very big there. But these Boston writers, they're ruthless. They smell blood in the water. They're asking everybody about it. And of course, they're going to ask Tristan Casas, who, while I love the talent, is, a very aloof fella, does his own thing, walks to the beat of his own drum kind of guy. Asks him about the situation. And, I had no problem with him defending, Rafael Devers, defending his teammate, defending the face of the franchise, talking about how, that's my third baseman. I have no problem with him like keeping that position. I think he's earned it, etc. But then he started playing, general manager and talking about, why Bregman's a great fit at second base and how these young guys, shouldn't be on the opening day roster. I think that we have a ton of great veterans in the room that need to, play ahead of them and they'll get their time. Tristan Casas has one, full season in the major leagues. He had a ton of potential, hit very well, not a great defender at first base. And I think, Tristan Casas wasn't just defending his teammate in Rafael Devers. I think a lot of where he was coming from is his own, future uncertainty. The Red Sox tried to trade him multiple times this offseason to Seattle. There was rumors that if they didn't get Bregman, that he would have been involved in the Arenado trade to hopefully get Helsley back as well. There was a chance that Tristan Casas got traded this offseason and that Rafael Devers might have been the Red Sox opening day first baseman. But we'll get to the next topic in a second. Tristan Casas, he's on a short leash with this Boston Red Sox roster. There's clearly a roster squeeze going on. And as a Red Sox fan, I'm happy about it. That means that I have a really talented baseball roster, that there's a lot of great guys and not enough spots. That hasn't been the case for the Red Sox in quite a while. When someone really is hitting and producing, they're an everyday player the last couple of years. But now, there's going to be some tough decisions, some guys that are above league average hitters that are not going to find playing time on this Red Sox team. And that's really exciting. But Tristan Casas, I think, was coming from a point of self-preservation a little bit. And he's got his little attitude about him. He gave the writers exactly what he wanted, and his sound bites went everywhere. And then finally, Big Papi David Ortiz was asked about this situation. And, Alex Cora, when asked about, should Big Papi come in to help him with that transition, he kind of said, like, we'll handle this in-house. Big Papi to me is in-house. He's Red Sox royalty, the gold bottles and, the championships. And he's always been, one of those guys that says, like, I'm always going to be here if these players, want to hear from a Hall of Fame hitter. And Big Papi gets asked about it after Cora kind of says that I'll handle it. I don't need him. That, Rafael Devers is not a Mickey Mouse type player. You're talking about the David Ortiz of the Boston Red Sox. You're talking about like this guy, you don't, move him off his position. That's his position. It's not like you wouldn't have a position in the lineup. It's not like you wouldn't be hitting at the same spot in the order. I just think defensively, it's pretty hard to argue. If you look at Rafael Devers' just complete WAR from the last 4 full seasons since the COVID shortened year, 3.7 WAR, 4.5 WAR, 3.5 WAR, 3.7 WAR with, negative run saving defense. If you look at Brent Rooker in 2024, a guy who, was an all-star snub and, hit extremely well, got an extension from the Oakland A's, one of the best designated hitters in baseball last year, 5.6 WAR. So if Rafael Devers moves off of the position, he can be a 5 to 6 WAR player with the potential. We saw Shohei Ohtani have 9 WAR as a designated hitter last year, have the potential of having one of these monster MVP type seasons as a DH. That barrier has been broken open. I know Rafael Devers wants to win MVPs and he probably wants to be a Hall of Famer someday and all those great things. This would actually help him get there because right now, at age 28, heading into his 9th major league season, he's got 22.5 WAR. That's a good number. He's just under 3 a year. But if he can, in his late 20s, early 30s, be a 4 to 6 win player a year, high, raise that floor, it'll push him towards Cooperstown even more. It'll help him, win a ring without that core of Betts and Bogarts. It'll be his team, those kind of things. There's a lot of narratives that can help Rafael Devers' legacy as well. And I understand, the pride, if he just, gave up the position of third base willingly without saying anything. Some people would call him lazy, fat, soft, and some people called him that anyway. But just not the vibes you were hoping for a week after, everyone's saying the Red Sox are back. Bregman was this missing piece. Look at this offseason as a whole now. The Red Sox in the American League East and the American League have a real shot to contend. They have these young stars coming up and all these negative vibes, fueled by the media and their questions, but, the players gave into them. And I hope that when we look back at, this spring training February story, that we talk about how this team came together from it, how, the emotions were high heading into the season, but once baseball started really being played, they just came together and, we're happy for whoever was producing offensively and defensively and on the mound, no matter who it was. And this is the kind of team that can go a long way as long as they don't get in front of themselves. Right now, they're in their own way. It's February. I'm going to trust my manager in Alex Cora. I'm going to trust Alex Bregman, who said all the right things so far in the interviews before and after these comments. I'm going to trust in my tribal chief and Jared Carrabis and say that I'm not worried about this right now. Could it develop into a bigger issue throughout the season if the clubhouse becomes toxic, if that dirty water truly becomes toxic? Absolutely. I've seen teams blow themselves up before right here in that city. But in general, I think that the Boston Red Sox are in a much better place than they've been in the last 4 or 5 years. I have a ton of expectations and hope for this season, and I want to continue to move off of this. I know it was a quieter sports week. I know they, gave into the writers and had these sound bites, but there's a lot of spring training left. There's a lot of baseball left to play. It's a marathon season, not a sprint. They have time to figure this out. They have time to play it right. And, there's so much talent on this Boston roster. There's so much talent that's going to be starting the year on the IL. That will be reinforcements. Starting in Worcester, that will be reinforcements. And I think that going over the luxury tax threshold will make them more likely to buy at the trade deadline when and if they need a piece. So Boston, there's a ton to be positive about, and even more so because Vladimir Guerrero Jr. deadline with the Toronto Blue Jays, the 17th, has passed for an extension. So he will now go to free agency. I don't know what Vladimir Guerrero is going to be asking for in the open market. I'm sure he's looking at what Juan Soto got, and he's a similar age. And, neither one of them are great defenders. And he's like, oh, well, I don't walk as much, but I'm a comparable player. He got 700-800 million. I can get 500 to 600 million. I don't think a first baseman in today's game of baseball is going to be someone that's pushing $600 million. Even at his age, we talked about that with Juan Soto, how he hit the market at the perfect time. But if Vladimir Guerrero Jr. goes out this year and has the type of season we just saw him have in 2024, which was a huge bounce back season for Vladdy, 6.2 WAR, 30 home runs, a 323 batting average. He scored 98 runs, drove in 103, hit 44 doubles, walked 72 times to 96 strikeouts, 396 on base, 544 slugging, a 166 OPS plus. If he can be a 150 OPS plus kind of guy hitting for a high average with that power at 27 years old, hitting the market, he's going to have some real suitors. And I know a lot of Red Sox fans have been saying that that's the most destination. And that's part of why I think Tristan Casas made those comments, because he not only sees, Devers moving off third base, he could take my spot at first base. Vladimir Guerrero Jr. hitting free agency and being tied to the Red Sox could be pretty bad for my future here. The roster squeeze in general. Vladimir Guerrero Jr. is an absolute star. And I think it's really interesting because you look at the teams that could afford to give Vladimir Guerrero Jr., his number, which is probably somewhere between $400 and $500 million, Trout money. That the Red Sox are right up there. They said that they would be willing to give long-term contracts to guys that aren't in their 30s. Vladimir Guerrero Jr., that spot's still open. Walker Buehler and Lucas Giolito and Aroldis Chapman's money's coming off the books next year. That's $50 million right there. Alex Bregman could opt out, and then they'd have $90 million open from just this year's current payroll. The New York Mets signed Pete Alonso to a 2-year deal. That's really a 1-year deal. And, if Pete Alonso opts in to make chump change for the Mets next year, he'll just be the DH, because Jesse Winker right now is scheduled to be the designated hitter. He's on a 1-year deal. So, trade out Jesse Winker in that lineup for Vladimir Guerrero Jr. The Mets could be really scary there. The Yankees, I didn't make it an actual talking point on this one, got rid of their facial hair rule. They will now allow finely groomed beards on their players. So Vladimir Guerrero Jr., who, seems to hate the Yankees, but if he can wear his hair the way he wants, maybe that's a fit. Paul Goldschmidt's on a 1-year deal there playing first base. Stanton's money is going to be coming off the books in a few years. He can transition to the DH role. So there's a lot of big time suitors out there that could move things around and be in play for Vladdy. I think it's very likely that he goes to New York or Boston. But there's also a handful of other teams that, might be willing to shell out that kind of money for Vladdy. We couldn't, possibly pay a player 6, 7, 800 million like Juan Soto, but to get a cornerstone young guy like Vladdy, we'll go out and do that. Part of me thinks that the Los Angeles Angels are going to make Vladdy a pretty lucrative offer because his father, had a very successful career, won his MVP out there in Anaheim. I think that they'll be in play. I think the San Francisco Giants should have signed Pete Alonso this offseason. I think they'll be in play for Vladdy next offseason. So it'll be really interesting to see who actually ends up being a suitor and who doesn't. But Vladimir Guerrero Jr., is going to free agency, which should be a shock to nobody because of what happened with Juan Soto last offseason and the kind of season Vladimir Guerrero Jr. is coming off of. Now, this makes it a make or break year for the Toronto Blue Jays. Bo Bichette is going into free agency as well. They just signed Anthony Santander, Jeff Hoffman. They traded for Andres Jimenez. They raised the floor of this team. The AL East, top to bottom, has 5 teams that could, certainly make the playoffs. And they're going to try to push with Vladdy and with Bo. But, someone gets hurt, things start going wrong. Bo and Vladdy could both be 2 of the biggest needle movers at the trade deadline this offseason. And, it makes them ineligible for that compensation pick value as well if they get traded halfway through the year. So it will be very, very interesting to see how that plays out. I think that Vlad's number that he gave Toronto, you're like, if you want me to walk away from free agency, you have to get me $600 million. I think I can get $450 to $550 on the open market. You have to give me 6 for me to not test it, because 6 is a real strong offer. Now, Vladimir Guerrero Jr. could come back down to earth. We've seen it before. He had that monster 2021 and when it was just a good but not great hitter the years after. If he does that again, he could be sitting in a Pete Alonso kind of situation where, he's trying to get the most AAV for a short-term deal. But Vladimir Guerrero Jr. will be hitting free agency 3-4 years younger than Pete Alonso just did, and I think is an overall better hitter. The WAR has a higher ceiling. He's a little bit better defender. He's won a Gold Glove at first base. He also hits for a high average, which I think is very underrated in today's game. People just care about on-base percentage, but a good batting average really does matter to me. And when you can have 30, 40 home run pop and you're hitting 280 to 320, you're a real tough out. Versus if you have 40 home run power, but you're hitting 220 and striking out so much more than you walk, that's where things get messy. But Vladdy walks. He doesn't strike out a ton. He hits home runs. He gets on base. He hits base hits. He's a real McCoy. And, this free agency will be super huge for him as well. We talked about Hall of Fame and, longevity and all those things. Vladimir Guerrero Jr. is trying to be the first father-son duo to make it into the National Baseball Hall of Fame. We have some sets of brothers in there, but we do not have a father and son. And that will be, a major, major milestone for not just the Dominican Republic, but for sports in general. We are rounding in on the last call here in 2025 free agency. Andrew Heaney signed a 1-year, $5 million deal with the Pittsburgh Pirates to help bolster the back end of that rotation where, guys like Bailey Falter and Johan Oviedo are battling out for that last spot in the last couple spots in the rotation behind the big 3. Bubba Andler has a really good chance, I think, of making the team as well if he performs this spring. So they have some options there at the end of this Pittsburgh Pirates lineup rotation. The lineup is where it kind of scares me. They did not add a ton there in Pittsburgh this offseason, despite Paul Skeens being one of the most marketable players, and they could definitely sell more tickets if they put a better product on the field in a winnable division. They haven't done that. They moved O'Neal Cruz to center field. They brought in Adam Frazier. They brought back McCutchen. They brought in Tommy Pham. I hope they go out there and sign Alex Verdugo because he's still out there. I predicted him to go there. I think that would be a really good fit. A guy that raises the floor of that team, has played in some big moments, gets on base, plays decent defense. That's the kind of guy you want to add to this Pirates roster. And there's still, a handful of guys out there right now, especially on the pitching side of things. And I don't get why this happens every single year. I've even heard GMs talk about it, like Andrew Friedman of the Dodgers talk about, we're overpaying now so we don't have to overpay at the trade deadline and give up prospects. Pay up for these arms now. Pay up for the depth now. Round out your lineups now when you're, pretty sure there's holes there, instead of having to in 3, 4, 5 months trade really valuable team controllable assets for these fringe level, these lower end level contracts. Every team in baseball can afford these guys that are out there right now. There's not an Alex Bregman sitting on the market anymore. There's not a Pete Alonso sitting on the market anymore. There's not even a Nick Pivetta sitting on the market anymore. There's a ton of guys that can help impact teams, especially on the reliever and the starting pitcher side of things. There's so many good arms still available that would cost a legitimate prospect down the line. And we've seen, some of these trades really look ugly when a team trades for a pitcher to help them get over the hump at the trade deadline. We've seen it time and time again. And teams can simply avoid that by bringing in, depth in the bullpen. Every team at every time in the season tends to need a bullpen piece. Most rotations do not have 5-6 guys that are above league average. Go out there, sign these guys. It's your last call to do so, because once you sign the guys into spring, it takes them a while to get ramped up, get acclimated, get chemistry with your catchers. A very overlooked point of spring training. That's why pitchers and catchers report first. Get dialed in, get chemistry with the catchers, and save you in the long run. This is why the Dodgers are the best. Not just because they spend all the money, but because they value development, they value their farm system, and they're not going to just trade away, high upside people that can contribute to their team down the line for rentals and fringe players that they can just go out and buy. And that's what makes the difference between, a team that's at the top of the league and a team that's just trying to make the wild card. So really, really hope more signings like Andrew Heaney happen. There's a lot of guys out there, especially on the bullpen side of things, that can help major league rosters, can make opening day teams, and at the very least are worth 40-man roster spots. Start the year on your AAA team, and the first time a pitcher goes down, you got a 6 starter ready to go. Make these moves now, major league teams. Here at the Solo Shot Sports Podcast with the throwback down the third base line to this day in baseball history. And February 22nd, Triple Twos here had quite a bit to choose from, actually. The Reggie Jackson Reggie Bar actually was released on this day in the 70s. There was also, a historic throw of a silver dollar by Walter Johnson at 38 years old to celebrate George Washington's birthday, 204th birthday. He threw a silver dollar over 368 feet. Walter Johnson, the big train, these stories, these myths out there about him, absolutely unbelievable. One of my favorite players to read about, and watch the limited footage that is out there, because he was just unreal, way ahead of his time. But the moment I wanted to come into today is actually a little bit more recent. On this day in 2017, it was made official by Major League Baseball that you no longer had to throw 4 pitches outside for an intentional walk. And this was big for 2 reasons. It was one big because of the aspect that you're speeding up the game. Intentional walks are boring. They take up time. Nobody wants to watch them. Once in a blue moon, a Vladimir Guerrero Jr. or Miguel Cabrera will get just enough of the ball to put it in play, and that's exciting. But intentional walks are one of the most boring things to watch in old school baseball. It also, saves the pitchers in an era where pitch count is so just out there and it's forward. It's on your TV screen. Teams are looking at it like crazy, monitoring it, like a shark. And this saves them, at least 4 pitches. I know they're not, high velocity, tough pitches, but it's saving their arm. And I'm all for it. I talked about how Rob Manfred gets a bad rap because of, the really bad lows, but so many incremental positive changes to the game. And this was one of them. And, we're talking about how, balls and strikes and, pitch count and speeding up the game, but like making it improved. And they are testing out now with the major leaguers here in spring training, something that's been tested in the minor leagues the last couple seasons, and that is the ABS. And this is not talking about your brake system. This is talking about a challenge for balls and strikes, something that fans have been dying for for years because of the bad calls. Some of them are really bad. Some of them weren't that bad that have happened to your favorite team over the years. And now they're testing this out. This is not a major league thing being implemented this year, where the batter, the catcher, and the pitcher all have a buzzer. If they want to challenge a pitch call that was either called a ball or a strike, they can challenge it. Now, they only get 2 challenges per game. And if you challenge and you lose it. So you get 2 for 9 innings. It doesn't make sense most of the time to use that early on in the baseball game. But, of course, these major league players are getting it for the first time and they want to use it. And, Max Muncy used it in the first inning of the Dodgers' first spring training game. Why I think this is a beautiful addition to the game. We sped up the game so much with the pitch clock, with no intentional walks having to actually be divvied out and thrown, with the base pad rules and not being able to throw over to first base a million times. We sped up the game a lot. We've made it more digestible. But with how quick some of these innings can go now, being able to challenge a questionable call, especially in a chance to rally, a chance to tie the game, late in the ball game, having a chance to actually challenge balls and strikes without it being a big hubbub where the manager gets thrown out of the game, I think is super, super interesting. The real question is, how teams will implement this. Will most teams, say you cannot challenge a call unless there's, runners in scoring position in the 5th inning or later? Is that how teams are going to handle it? Are some teams only going to allow, certain proven veterans to have the opportunity to challenge these calls? Are pitchers or catchers going to be the ones that are more responsible for challenging these calls with the umpires? The catchers interact with the, umpires more, but pitchers have a better line of sight to where that ball actually ended up. And it's very, very interesting, this whole ABS conversation. I do think it will be implemented in the next collective bargaining agreement. But I really love these improvements. I talked about, winning in the margins on last week's show, and baseball has been winning in the margins a lot, with these, slight improvements here and there, these things that just improve the quality of the game, make it more digestible, and, does a lot. I'm not a fan of robot umpires. I don't want to take out the human element of the game, but having a way to efficiently and legally challenge, those calls, those balls and strikes, that's going to be a big game changer. And having the limit, having to use them, and if you use them incorrectly, you lose them. It'll make teams hold on to them longer. I think it's very, very exciting. And it's going to improve the game of baseball. It's going to continue to make things more fun to watch. And I'm very much here for it. These are the kinds of things that we're missing. There's been so many, questionable strike calls or argued strike calls in the history of the game, and having a way to, professionally challenge them now. That's, similar to the pitch comm. It's just a button that gets pressed. I think it's, a really, really beautiful thing. And I hope that they work out all the kinks here with the major leaguers in spring. I'm sure they'll find some issues with it. A lot of these minor leaguers coming up through the system are going to already be experienced with it. It's going to integrate very nicely when baseball finally gives it the green light. I appreciate each and every one of you for spending part of your Solo Shot Saturday with me, Hugo, Will, Scott, Mookie, everyone that was in the chat. Thank you. Hope you guys stay warm this weekend here. We're still in the dead of winter. It's been real cold up here on the Northeast. I hope you guys stay positive. Do not drink that toxic water. And if you enjoyed the show, make sure you like the video here on YouTube and subscribe if you haven't already to the channel. Give me a review on Apple Podcasts and share this show with a friend who loves the game of baseball as much as we do. I'm Dom Manna, and I'll see you guys next week.